Hello and welcome to the very first interview with It's Hardback Out Here, and I am joined with the wonderful Natali.
Hello.
How does it feel to be the first It's Hardback Out Here author guest?
Yeah, I'm really excited and honored. This is very, very cool. I love the sound of the book club.
So
Congrats.
your book's just come out on Kindle and ebook release. How is it
Yeah,
going so far? How do you feel?
yeah, it literally came out today's Thursday, so 4 days ago on Monday. And it's been surreal because when it comes out digitally, literally nothing happens. You haven't even held your book yet. It's not in bookshops. It's just people online talking about reading and listening to it digitally. So it's a relief to know it's out there and I can finally start talking to readers. But at the same time, it's just, yeah, it's a bit surreal because until it's out in the shops, it doesn't feel real yet.
And also it's been adapted for, well, it's being adapted for TV rights. How does that make you feel?
It's crazy because it's always been a dream of mine, and to be honest, I didn't think it would happen with the very first thriller that I've written. This isn't my first book, but it's my first thriller. And in publishing, nothing happens for years and years and everything happens all at once. So yeah, in the space of a year I got my very first agent, a brilliant deal with a really great publisher, and a TV deal. So it's been incredibly I don't know, humbling and exciting. And the team is amazing. And we're talking to some really, really cool script writers. So we'll see who ends up being attached to the TV series, but it's happening. And I'm incredibly excited.
Yeah, it's so exciting. So obviously we're going to be talking about Good Girls Die Last, and I would say it's kind of like a female rage filled thriller. It's a girl who kind of takes misogyny into her own hands after staying silent for all of her life. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, a number of things all happened in the summer of 2021. There was a lot of anger and rage following the murder of Sarah Everard and what happened at the vigil and the Met Police and all the horrors attached to that. And I remember reading a tweet where somebody said it's about time we had a female falling down, a feminist falling down. And Falling Down is an 80s Michael Douglas movie where a guy's stuck in a heat wave in LA and traffic jam, and his anger is building and building. And in the end, the smallest things trigger him until he goes on this huge rampage. And I could really empathize with that. I felt like a lot of women were feeling that way at the
Yeah.
time. And I was also watching Promising Young Woman, and then I happened to watch Summer of Sam, which is also set in a New York heat wave during the real murders that were happening back then, with Son of Sam in the 70s. And it all started to amalgamate in my mind. And it was the summer holidays, and I've actually got a suitcase where the handle doesn't work very well and I can't part with it. But it started making me think about our own kind of emotional baggage and what that meant. So the suitcase in the book is very much a real thing, as are a lot of her experiences. Basically everything that happens to Emma's happened to me or people I know at some point. So there was a lot I wanted to say, and I ended up doing it in a thriller.
So were there any books that you read that kind of sparked your female rage in the same way that maybe you hope this book will do the same for other women?
Yeah, I really, really love Naomi Alderman's The Power. And I think that came out in 2017. And I read it in 2018, and it really stayed with me. And it's now been successfully adapted for Prime, and I'm enjoying watching the series.
Yeah.
Um, but I love the way that she dealt with it because she was looking at how power corrupts. So it's not so much that men are to blame when it comes to all the horrible things happening in the world. It was much more the fact that they are literally, physically, financially more powerful than us or have been. Sorry, my cat's joining in on the chat. And and then I yeah, she only ever comes when I'm talking to somebody online. And then I also read The Change by Kirsten Miller, who ended up blurbing my book. And there's a whole wave really of books coming out, a lot of them around the menopause. Mine not so. Mine Em's about to turn 30, which is also a big milestone in a lot of women's lives.
Mm.
And I'm incredibly excited about Joanne Harris's Broken Light that's coming out soon, and Julie Cohen's Bad Men. So I think there's a general feeling at the moment, especially amongst women my age, where enough is enough, and there's a lot of women fighting back books. But The Power was the one that really kind of instigated all this for me.
And I guess if there's a lot of women who are saying like enough is enough, and there are lots of these books and films such as Promising Young Women, how did you find it being different, how did you find something else to say? Because we're all fed up of sexism and misogyny. How did you kind of go, I'm going to say it in a different way, but just going to grip people and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that was interesting because what I didn't want to write was a man-hating book. I don't hate men. Some of the most amazing people in my life are men. My husband, my dad, my stepdad, brilliant men that I work with, people that have come and gone in my life. There's nothing wrong with men. It's 50% of the world. I didn't want a man-hating book. I didn't even want a revenge book. There were aspects of Promising Young Woman and other books that I've read where I didn't like that. I wanted that nice balance that the Power showed, where they were concentrating more on the problem and not who's to blame. So I was approaching it from that point of view. I wanted a book that men were also going to enjoy and maybe learn something. So it was much more about what does it mean to be a woman, to be in your 20s, attractive, trapped mentally, physically, literally. Her scenario is very much kind of like one issue after another. And there are days like that where just you think nothing else can go wrong and it gets worse and worse. So really I was much more focusing on the realities of what it is to be a woman, more than like men are awful, let's get our own back, because I think it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than that. And I hope that comes across in the book, because she doesn't actually seek revenge initially. Something happens where things can't get any worse and she's got nothing left to lose, and that frees her up, and then she's able to shout, speak up. But actually I think I kept it quite realistic, because sadly, we can't just shout about it and it's all going to go away. It doesn't work that way.
It's definitely not like this guy's done something bad, therefore wants revenge on him. It's more nuanced than that, as you say. And how much of your own experiences kind of informed M's character? Because obviously we see her being sexually assaulted in work, and she, all of that happens, and there's lots of things that happens where they're real experiences that so many women have had. So how much did your own experiences inform that writing?
A huge amount. It's only following the Me Too movement that made me think, oh, wait a minute, that was sexual abuse. Oh, wait a minute, that wasn't funny. That was actually abusive, because I'm 44, so I was in my 20s during the 90s and the early 2000s, where there was a lot more misogyny and a lot more of that kind of, it was only a man being funny and you should take it as a compliment going on, even to the point where on my first day at work I was 18 years old and my chair broke, and my new boss, a guy in his 30s going through a divorce, turned to the whole office and shouted out, you can sit on my lap for the rest of the day, huh? And everybody laughed, men and women. And I was 18, sitting there like, okay, I should laugh along. It's my new boss. There's nothing funny about a guy saying, come and sit on my lap in front of everyone. And that's only a small example. So I wanted to have the abuse that she experiences. She's not raped. It's not an obvious thing. It's little. It's small enough where you think, I don't know, is it worth it? And it is, and they're the kind of microaggressions that we as women face, especially when you're younger, in your 20s, like a lot of the people in this book club are going to be. And that's what I wanted to come across. So yeah, I was coming back from work once again, 18, 19 years old, and I was attacked on the tube station. And I remember saying to everybody, I was wearing trousers. I didn't have a skirt on. As if that matters. It was 6 o'clock, it was busy, I wasn't out on my own at midnight. And he grabbed me between the legs, this guy, and ran off. And I remember I screamed something out and the guards ran after him, but nobody caught him. And I didn't report it, because I just thought, I saw the back of his head, I've got nothing to say, and I'm not going to let this creep ruin my day. And I went home in the dark, terrified that he was waiting for me somewhere. And I went to work the next day, and I wasn't going to let him get in the way. And I wish I had reported it, because he ended up on Crime Watch a week later for a number of sexual attacks, and then a rape, I think, or an attempted rape. And he'd been going along the whole Northern Line. So it was little things like that had happened to me when I was younger that I wouldn't say scarred me, but stayed with me. And worse things. I went backpacking on my own and had someone broke into my hotel room, which was awful. But again, I woke up before anything could have happened, and I was like, oh, goodness sake, lock the door. It wasn't a hotel room, it was a hostel. There were other people in the room at the time, asleep. So I had a lot of near misses, which at the time I was very much like, oh, it's just how it is, and it's not how it is. And I've got 2 daughters now, and they would take that a lot more seriously now than I did back then. And I think that's her realization throughout the book, you know.
So for some context, Natalie used to be my boss at Jericho Writers, and she encouraged me to go on my own solo backpacking trip. So thank you for that, Natalie.
You're welcome. I think it was probably a bit safer than it was for me 20 years ago.
I think it was a little bit, but there's still so much misogyny out there. And that was something that I was, just so shocked by, just having to educate men on like basic women's safety issues. And it's so easy to internalize it and to believe that it's our fault, and then to feel guilty about coming forwards. So how did you write when Em wants to expose the man who sexually assaulted her in work? How did that make you feel? Was that kind of you wishing that you'd done that yourself?
I don't know, because I don't think it would have worked when I could have done it. Literally nothing would have happened if I'd have even tried to do that. So her experience of trying to talk about it with the HR woman was much more the kind of experience I probably would have had myself 20 years ago. But if it was happening now, then I think I would be straight on Twitter, like straight away, because I think the environment that we've created, women especially, and other men, of support now online, outing, talking about things, I think that's much more acceptable. And she realizes that. And that's why I created the character Rose as well, because I wanted that foil, that kind of complete opposite to her, so we could look at different kind of women and how they will approach things. But there's no right or wrong in the book. Like, I don't want anyone to be reading it thinking, well, that's how a woman should be in these situations, because actually every situation is different, and sometimes it is more dangerous to say something than not. And that's what she discovers as she goes along.
And we see as well, when Rose does kind of stand up against the little things, it's almost worse to do that sometimes, because then you can't win in situations. You just get kind of people calling you feminazis, all these kinds of things. And I thought that you did that really well. And also the descriptions of just the slimy men. Cat interruption.
Yeah. I've got a cat flap in my office, and she's just in and out trying to get attention. Sorry.
Well, our conversation's clearly very good. So yeah, the descriptions of like the slimy men I thought were really good as well, and how when you do stand up for yourself, it's almost like it gets worse for you, right? So what messages are you trying to convey through the book, for women perhaps, and also for men? And do you think there's a world where women like can actually exist? Because obviously this is a fictional book. Do you think there is a world where women can kind of take on misogyny or sexism, or do you think it is just easier to stay silent?
I think they already are. It might not seem obvious because it's not done in such a dramatic, like the ending's obviously pretty dramatic because I've written in a book, but I think we already are. I think the Me Too movement was huge, and it has maybe it's not so obvious for your generation to see that, because there's so much more that still needs to be done. But if I was to compare today with 20 years ago, which to me doesn't feel that long ago when I was your age, we have moved on a huge amount, and I think we're moving even faster. So actually we are making a difference. So an example today, actually, my daughter was telling me how some boy, she's 14, in her class was being a bit inappropriate to one of the girls on the chat, and she screenshot it and sent it to one of the boys in the class, and the boy put it on the boy group chat, outed him. All the boys in the class were saying, dude, that's not cool. We never had that before. There are guys now that get it, and they are educating their own peers, and I think that's what we've always needed until it's just a matter of education. It starts at that young age. So I think as a mother, I take it very, very seriously that we raise strong girls, but more importantly, we raise respectful boys. It's a bit of a lost cause now for the Trumps of this world, but they're not really going to matter in 10 years time. They won't be around. So I think I hope we're going in the right direction. I think we are. There's a lot, especially like that what you hear in America, and a lot of right-wing rhetoric at the moment that sounds like we're not, but luckily men are educated now, and I think there's more of us that understand what's acceptable and what's not.
So there's kind of like a serial killer on the loose who's killing women. Um, how did that kind of make you feel writing that? Like, did it kind of scare you? Because the book feels dystopian to an extent, but it's also really real, like we've seen with Sarah Everard and so many other women that are murdered, almost like an episode of Black Mirror where it's almost real, but it could be real at the same time. And obviously the 40-degree heat wave that literally happened last summer. So how did it make you feel writing something which could be dystopian but also could be real, like treading that sort of tightrope?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously my background's fantasy and I didn't want to write a fantasy book, but then I do find have found that actually what's been happening in reality in the last 5 years is worse than anything we could have come up with. You know, who thought that Trump would be president, sorry to bring him up again, or who thought that the whole world was shut down for 2 years because of an airborne virus. Those things sounded like something that the Simpsons were writing about, and they've come true. So for me, for somebody who was brought up in Spain, I've got a house there still, and it often reaches 43 degrees. I didn't think 40 degrees in London was that unrealistic, the way climate change is happening. And I remember when I got signed by Headline and my editor was like, it's a bit dystopian. Can we change it to like 35, 36? That's hot enough in London. And I was like, okay, fine, but I really want it to be hot. He's like, that's hot enough. And that was in the April. And then by July of last year, I sent him an email saying, hot enough for you, Toby. I was like, right, well, it's reached 40 in London and this has to be record breaking. And he was like, okay, fine, change it. Because I wanted it to be realistic. But I think a lot of the world at the moment has been feeling dystopian and unrealistic. So it wasn't that much of a stretch. And as for a serial killer, we haven't had a London serial killer for a while, but there are serial killers still out there. And
we won't get one anytime soon.
yeah, sorry. Hopefully I'm not going to like inspire anyone. But that's actually not even part of the story. Like we don't really find out. Sorry, no spoilers, but he's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that there are so many aspects that make women feel constantly under threat that he's just one of them, and women are still being blamed. Watch what you wear, don't go out, maybe there should be a curfew. That's why I had that constant Twitter dialogue going on simultaneously with her own journey, so that you could see how nationally the world, or the whole city, was kind of building up into this point of boiling point tension, while her own private life was also doing the same thing. Because I think the media plays into it a lot as well. And I just wanted to reflect how women are often blamed for being murdered.
Yes, so that was kind of my next point, was that the onus is on women, and obviously we're going to talk about the tweets as well. All of the tweets, kind of the Daily Mail and the ones you did, you captured the essence of the newspapers really well. But a lot of them are kind of blaming women, and then when it reaches the climax, then men are saying they're afraid of women and they're afraid to go out, and the women are saying, well, how do you think we feel every day? So why did you focus on Twitter as a platform? So there are kind of the tweets running throughout, as you say. I thought that they were so well done, especially kind of the keep GB great ones and the usernames that you did, because
that took the longest, Emily, honestly. It took me longer, I think, to come up with handles that didn't already exist, that would reflect the kind of people behind them, than to write the book.
They were fantastic, just how you captured the kind of different voices of society within those. Yeah, so why did you focus on Twitter as a platform instead of, say, Instagram or maybe TikTok?
Well, firstly, because of her age. She's nearly 30, and I think because of the life she has and because of her personality, I don't think she'd be on TikTok all the time, or at least she wouldn't be making videos. Same with Instagram. I don't think she's very forward in that respect. And I wanted her to have one of those kind of secret accounts on Twitter where she just has got an outlet for moaning. I think Twitter's really good for moaning, right? So Instagram's showing off, TikTok's having fun, Facebook is a bit outdated now, and Twitter, I'm on it all the time. I try not to moan on it, but most people moan on it. I'm on it literally 24/7. So for me, it was very natural to include that. And it was a tweet that inspired me to write this book. And ironically, it was a tweet that got me my agent, because it was a friend of mine also called Emma Cooper, a writer, who loved this book. And she happened to write on Twitter, oh my God, this book's going out. Natalie's going to start querying whatever agent gets their hands on this. It's going to be so lucky. And her own agent saw that tweet and said, Emma, what the hell? Like, it sounds amazing. Can you get Natali to send it to me? And her agent was my dream agent. So I said, are you kidding? Like, I didn't think Amanda was open for queries. And I snagged an agent in 3 days. I didn't even bother querying anyone else because Amanda's awesome.
Amazing. Dream.
Yeah, right. It was all a bit too easy. I was like, okay, everything's perfect. It's changed my life. Okay. And it was the fastest book I've ever written as well. I think I did the first draft in like 6 weeks because it was just basically, it's already in my head, you know.
Yeah.
It was so much of it I knew fundamentally it was a truth that was easy to write. But yeah, for Twitter, I'm on it all the time. And I thought it was just the perfect platform for that mixture of people that you're going to get, much more than others at the moment.
And obviously, a lot of what Em writes about on Twitter is the fact that she's bisexual and she chose to keep her girlfriend a secret from her family because she didn't feel like she could talk about that. What was that like, writing a bisexual character? And you kind of do a lot of stereotype breaking down. There's a homeless character, there's Rose, there's so many stereotypes. How was that process for you, and what stereotypes were you careful of kind of not playing into?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're just people with different circumstances. Didn't even cross my mind that being bi was a thing. It was just, she was always going to be bi because I needed her to not be true to herself in many aspects of her life, and for her to discover who she really was and to take pride in that. And I mean, I come from a community, a family where, you know, who you are, what you are is not an issue. But I have lived in parts of Spain, especially in the south, which is very Catholic, near Ronda, where it's set, where that would be an issue. And I wanted that explored. But her sexuality is not part of the plot. Moby being homeless is kind of by the by, you know, like, these are all human beings, and that's what I wanted to focus on. Originally, Rose was actually going to be a sex worker, but my agent and I talked about it, and we thought that was too big a theme to put in there, because I started going off about Rose's life, and there were whole scenes which revolved around her being a sex worker, and we thought, oh no, that's probably a book in itself. Let's stick to the point. So we made her much more relatable. So she's just doing a really long, arduous walk of shame after a one night stand, which more people, I imagine, can relate to. But she kept her personality. So yeah, for me, it was stereotypes. They're there for a reason, and I think they exist. There are, you know, like the two older ladies in the airport that are bigoted, and the woman outside St. Paul's that is wearing a very tight dress because she's older and overweight. She doesn't think that it's inappropriate. But obviously, Em being young and sexier looking, she's judging her for it, you know. So I kind of wanted to have these real subtle reflections of society and what London is to me. I think London's a melting pot of everybody, the very rich, the very poor, different nationalities, different backgrounds. When I moved there, I was daughter of an immigrant. I didn't even speak English. I was 7 years old. We were homeless for a year. Didn't have anywhere to live, ended up on my nan's sofa for a whole year. My mum got a job in a baker's part-time. My dad didn't even speak English. Yeah, it was hard. So I know what that's like. I know what it's like to belong somewhere but not be treated like you do. I was picked on, I was bullied at school for being the foreigner. So that's nothing new to me. So I was definitely writing what I already knew.
And there's lots of microaggressions that M goes through as well, because lots of people call her Em or Emmy, which is not her real name, and in work they assume that she's called Emily, which, and then at the end, you know, her mother kind of says her real name, and people just don't even bother trying because they think they can't pronounce it. Why did you choose to reveal Em's real name at such a pinnacle moment, and was it always going to come from her mother?
It wasn't actually. It was going to come out in the speech without just giving it all away. It's going to come out right at the very end, the big kind of finale, which, by the way, I'm not going to tell you what it was inspired by, because then people will know what happens, but it was inspired by another finale in another movie. But I'll tell you later. But it was going to be announced then. And it, because her mother always calls her hija, which is daughter, but it was actually, I think it was my editor who's like, well, have the mother say her name. I was like, yeah, let her be recognized, because I didn't realize that was a thing. As a writer, you don't realize that you have these kind of repetitive motifs or themes or tropes running through your book until you look back and you go, oh, clearly I have an issue in my life that I keep putting and projecting into my books. So in the Pathkeeper series, which is a fantasy series I write as J Simmonds, there's a girl in it called Ella, and her mother remarries to a man called Mr. Fantz and insists she changes her name, and she's called Elephants, right? And obviously that plagues her whole time at school and that. And then I realized I was doing it again with the whole name and getting it confused. And it's because of my own name, really. My name's Natali, but it's spelt without an E. Always been an issue in my life. Again, not my choice, my mother's choice. In Spain, I was called Natalia. In England, they wrote it with an E. My full name is Natali J Simmonds. The Juste is spelled Juste. No one says it right. The Spanish say juste, the English say just. I've been called Juste, it's French as well. It's a very French surname. It's driven me mad my entire life. That's why I ended up writing as Simmonds. And then when I got married, I chose not to change my name, which I think to some extent upset my husband a little bit, because the kids and him have all got one name and I just kept my maiden name, because I fought so hard for this name to work. I didn't want to let it go, even though his is a much simpler name. So I think names is like, it's this big thing for me, So yeah, that ended up in my book. I have to be careful not to make it a big thing. So like, I'm writing another book at the moment. I nearly did it again. I was like, that's enough with the name.
Enough for the names. So you're like, what trauma can I project onto this book?
Yeah, right. It's like, oh my God. Well, actually, my next book is about a woman in a really unhappy relationship, and I had to sit my husband down and be like, it's not us. All these things she's feeling is not me. It's actually a couple of my friends, but it's not me. So it's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting how you talk about surnames, because I have a similar thing where my surname's D'Souza, and I grew up kind of people ridiculing it or feeling kind of different, and now I think it's kind of my identity, and it makes you into the woman that you are, right? Having to deal with that kind of thing. And what I really loved about M's mum revealing her name was that her mum's always kind of been this silent woman putting up with like abuse, and you kind of see that, but then her saying M's name kind of empowers M, and then M comes to the realization that her mother's kind of silence and passivity wasn't weakness, but actually it was strength and protecting her daughters.
Yeah, that's what made me cry so much, right, in that scene.
Yeah, it was really, really poignant. It's absolutely fantastic. So what can people in their 20s take away from this book and M's character in particular?
Yeah, I think I just I didn't go out to write a didactic book and teach anyone any lessons, because I hate that. I hate it when you read a book and you know that the author's trying to like drum a message through. I wanted it to be much more of a mirror, just to reflect society, just show what's happening and what could happen. But with M specifically, I just want to show people in their 20s, especially women, to show themselves a bit of grace. Just be kind to yourself, to not expect to know it all. Like she's a day away from turning 30, and she had this kind of tick off point in her life, like, I'm nearly 30. Why haven't I got my love life together and my career together? Why am I lying to everyone? Why am I lying to myself? And I think we're all too hard on ourselves. I was like that. I was like, right, well, by 30, I need to have this, and this in my life. But actually, it makes no difference. Like, my life now is on a turning point, and I'm in my mid 40s. Like, and who cares? I saw that Anna Wintour is 73 yesterday, and I was like, what? She's so cool. She's 73. I've got loads of time. So that was important for me, that younger women reading this would feel empowered, hopefully, and inspired. But more than anything, just be kind to themselves and realize that it's okay to not know who you are, even in your 40s or 50s or 60s. Not know who you are, but at the same time, be true to yourself. And to and also to surround yourself with the right people. Like Moby's such a lovely guy, but he's a homeless guy, so You know, a lot of people don't even see him sitting there, yet the son of an MP is an absolute piece of shit.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's getting lots of attention, and she ends up, you know, being involved with him, even though she hates him, you know, because there's a lot of her self-sabotaging that takes place. And I think at the end, she very much reaches that fuck it stage. And I think women especially should reach the fuck it stage a lot sooner in their life. It normally happens in your 30s or 40s. I'd like to see women in their 20s do it, because it would make life so much easier.
100%. And I loved how when it kind of came to light what happened between Em and Matt, one of the tweets was like, I bet he's going to get a book deal out of this. And the reality is that he probably would in in the world.
Yeah, and I didn't really want him to be like, you know, and Paul gets punished and Matt's life's ruined. Their lives won't be ruined, because in reality they're not ruined. They're cancelled for a week, they get loads of publicity out of it, and they reinvent themselves. But at least they got called out.
And I think Kate and Dante's characters are really, really good as well, in terms of just surrounding yourself with people who get it and understand it, and showing that. I think what's really good is that you show that some men do get it as well. Like, it's not just like all men are awful, all men are just slimy, like assaulters. There are lots of men that do kind of understand it as well, and I think that we are moving more that way.
That's why I had the two guys in the car come up and ask her, does she need a lift? And they're scared to ask her because they know that she's probably going to say no. And ironically, if she'd have got in the car with these two probably nice guys, none of this would have happened. But she didn't know. She didn't know who was the good one, who was the bad one. And, you know, the jury's still out with Kate. Kate's a bit vanilla, and I did that on purpose because she's very nice and very sweet. And we've all got somebody who's very nice and very sweet. You just don't know if they would stick their neck on the line as much as Rose would when it actually matters. She does at the end, but she's empowered at that point. You know, she didn't really at the very beginning when she could have helped.
Yeah. And finally, my last question before we wrap up this interview, what made you come up with the title of Good Girls Die Last?
Well, originally I had it, the working title was Descent, because I was inspired by falling down. So I was like, oh, that works, Descent. And I wanted it to be this kind of gradual unraveling of her mind and her life. But then I mean, my background's marketing, so I did approach this whole thing quite commercially. And I was thinking, okay, well, books with the word girls in do really well to do. You know, girl on the train, girl at the window, woman at the window, whatever. So I was like, okay, let's see if I can do something with good girls. Good girls is being used a lot. It shows that it's feminist. And I only found out afterwards there was a book called Good Girls Die First, which I think is also an expression, and I think that's a murder mystery, but it's a YA book. But I was playing around with some names, and I said to Emma Cooper, my author friend, one of many, what do you think of this one? I thought it sounded a bit like a Bond movie. She was like, no, it's perfect. And I was like, well, okay, we'll go with it, because it kind of sums it all up, because that's what it means. She lives her whole life thinking that good girls will die last, that you're safe by being a good girl, you know, keep out of trouble, don't attract any attention. That's what it really means. And so I got my agent with that title, and I got my editor with that title. And then the editor was like, well, should we play around with a few other? I'm not sure. And we're like, okay. We went back and forth with 40 different title suggestions. And then we circled back, and everybody at Headline decided it was the best title. So I got to keep
it. Encapsulates everything that the book is, really. So yeah, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Good luck for the publication date.
Excited.
We're very excited to read this book, and for everyone to learn more about how to handle misogyny and how to handle your female rage in a way that is constructive. And yeah, I think it will empower and inspire so many women.
I hope so. And I'll always be adding lots of things to my website. So you can either go to njsimmonds.com or save-em.com. I decided to buy the URL of Save Em. So save-em.com. That'll take you straight to Good Girls Die Last page. And I will be updating events and signings and interviews, and anything that I do, anything like this, I'll just upload onto that page.
And finally, I guess, who is your absolute dream actress for Em? If you could pick anyone in the world, who would you go for? Like, who did you picture in your head when you were writing her character?
I pictured Anna de Armas in my head, but a younger version of her, like when she was in her 20s. But now I'm not sure I mean, visually, I think she works, but actually, because this was a question that the studios asked me, because we are talking casting, we are talking ideas, and I have given them a list of suggestions. But I would really, really love a real half Spanish unknown actress to play that part, and I would like this series to be the series that defines her career, like the book has defined mine. So she's out there somewhere. I don't know who she's going to be yet.
That's so exciting. Well, I'm sure it'll go very well.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much.